the Australian captain. The moment he has been working and waiting for. There it is. Francois Pienaar and Nelson Mandela. Rugby before this World Cup this season. But there he is now, receiving the trophy from the Queen. All 6'7" of him.
The crazy thing about that night is that we all went back to the hotel and sat with our wives.
Khaleesi and South Africa are Rugby World Cup kings!
South Africa are back-to-back Rugby World Cup champions.
Every foreign-born player in every Rugby World Cup winning team. Look, this is going to be a little, I guess you can, nerve-wracking, right, for little people. Some people might find it offensive, but we're going to go through every single World Cup squad that has won a Rugby World Cup, and we're going to point out just the amount of players that were born overseas. So it's not a lot. It's nothing crazy. It's not to try and crap on someone, but it's interesting to see how through the years this have changed and how certain nations, I guess, have high percentages, right? Because what's that? Only 4 nations have ever won the Rugby World Cup, and that is Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and England. So let's go through these teams. It's quite interesting. I find it interesting anyway. This is what I like about rugby. It's just the differentiality and also just how certain teams now in the year of 2025 have way too many overseas born players, in my opinion anyway. I think it takes opportunities away from a lot of players, for example, like in Scotland, etc. And I'm not downplaying the fact that these players are there for a better opportunity compared to their home nation, but I think a lot of local players miss out. But as rugby grows, more opportunities will come, and in total, it'll be better for the game. It'll make the game more even. You know, better players will play for certain nations, and it might create more upsets in the future. But let's get into it. The first one, who remembers this? The 1987 Rugby World Cup in New Zealand, won by New Zealand. You can see there, in 1987, there was one player born overseas out of a squad of 25. An interesting thing too is to note how the squads keep getting bigger and bigger as well as the World Cups keep going. The one player that was born overseas was John Gallagher, born in England. So only 4% of the team was born overseas. You can see here, there's the results as well. So New Zealand beating Italy 70 points to 6, Fiji 74-13, Argentina 46-15, smashing Scotland in the quarterfinal 30 points to 3, thrashing Wales in the semi-final 49-6, and then New Zealand smashing France in the final 29-9. And that is the closest game they had the whole World Cup. So 21 points. I mean, that's an absolute walloping. Probably the most dominant performance in a World Cup to date, if you're looking at the pure results. So you can't take that away from them, for sure. 1987, All Blacks, well done. Best performance out of any Rugby World Cup I've ever seen. Now to 1991, and Australia winning this one. Total players born overseas were 4, 22 born in Australia. The players born overseas is Jeff Miller, born in the USA, Viliami Ofahengawe, born in Tonga, Richard Toombs from New Zealand, Bob Egerton from New Guinea, and the coach was by Bob Dwyer. And you can see the results here, 32-19 over Argentina, 9-3 over Western Samoa, 38-3 over Wales, 19-18 in a nail-biter against Ireland in the quarterfinal. That might have been the Irish's moment to break that quarterfinal curse, but just couldn't do it. Australia beating New Zealand 16-6, and Australia beating England 12 points to 6 in the final. So 4 players, 15% of the team, born overseas in total. Now we go to 1995, South Africa, with one player being born overseas, and that's Gary Teichmann. Born in Rhodesia back then it was. So 96.6% of the team born in SA and 3.4% overseas. Kitch Christie, who to me is one of the best coaches in history, coaching that team. And their results was 27-18 over Australia, 21-8 over Romania, close game by our standards now, I guess. SA 20-0 over Canada, 42-14 over Western Samoa, 19-15 over France in the semi-final, and then winning 15-12 over the All Blacks in the final with in extra time as well with a drop kick. Now we move to 1999. Australia again, 4 again overseas born, Jeremy Paul from New Zealand, Tutai Kefu from Tonga, Tian Strauss from South Africa, and George Gregan from Zambia. Coached by Rod McQueen, this team went undefeated, smashing Romania 57-9, beating Ireland 23-3, smashing USA 55-19, beating Wales 24-9 in a quarter, 27-21 over South Africa in the semi-final, which was an extra time as well. I mean, if you remember Larkham, that drop kick from nearly 50. And then Australia smashing France in the final, 35-12. Now, 2003, the one and the only thing the Northern Hemisphere can hold on to is England winning the World Cup. With 5 players born overseas, Dorian West from Wales, Simon Shaw from Kenya, Kyron Bracken from Ireland, Stuart Abbott from South Africa, and Mike Catt from South Africa. It's a bit of a tough one to count Wales, I guess, because I guess it is still Great Britain, so technically it is the same country. I don't really, in my head, would count it, but technically Wales is being represented by Wales, so you'd have to count it, in my opinion. The coach, Clive Woodward, who is now Sir Clive Woodward, the results were 26-5 over South Africa, 35-22 over Samoa, 111-13 over Uruguay, 27-17 over Wales in a quarter, 24-7 over France in the semi, and then beating Australia 20-17 with that Johnny Wilkinson right-footed drop kick. Man, iconic is the least to say. I've always gone for the Southern Hemisphere teams, but that has to be etched into one of the most clutch rugby moments in history. Now we move to 2007, where South Africa pulled as one back again, with 31 born in South Africa, 1 overseas with Bobby Skinstad from Rhodesia, with the coach, Jake White. Here's the results here, 59-7 over Samoa, 36-0 over England, which was crazy. And this was when England they were on, man. They were a good rugby team back then. So that result really surprised a lot. South Africa 30-25, nearly losing to Tonga. South Africa, at this point, South Africa is known now for letting one slip here and there, right? I mean, Japan 2015 comes to mind. South Africa beating USA 64-15. South Africa beating Fiji in a quarter, 37-20. Beating Argentina 37-13 in the semi, and then beating England 15-6 in the final to secure their second Rugby World Cup. I remember watching that live as well before school in New Zealand. What a game it was. Now 2011, the era of the All Blacks, arguably the best teams in history, 2011-2015 New Zealand team. Born in New Zealand, 27, 4 born overseas. Ben Franks in Australia, Jerome Kaino in American Samoa, Isaiah Toiava in Samoa, and Mills Mulayina in Samoa as well. Graham Henry was the coach. 41-10 over Tonga in the opening match. This was in New Zealand as well. I remember I was in Auckland at this point. New Zealand smashing Japan 83-7, beating France 37-17, smashing Canada 79-15, and then going on to beat Argentina 33-10 in the quarterfinal, 20-6 in the semi. And then, man, that final, it was, you could hear a pin drop. The crowd, I think, many times was so stressed. They were imagining a big win. Obviously, New Zealand beating them 37-17 in pool play and then coming down to a 8-7 with Stephen Donald kicking the ball over to win the game with a few minutes left. And it's a well-deserved World Cup in New Zealand as well, in front of the home crowd. Now we go to 2015, New Zealand again. 27 born in New Zealand, 6 overseas. So this is probably the highest number now. With Ben Franks, Jerome Kaino, Pauliasi Manu from Tonga, Tawera Kurabalo from Australia, Malakai Fekitoa, Tonga, and Iwasaki Naholo from Fiji. Steve Hansen's coach, beating Argentina 26-16, Namibia 58-14, Georgia 43-10, Tonga 47-9. In the quarterfinals, smashing France 62-13, beating South Africa 20 points to 18 in a nail biter with a drop kick from Dan Carter, and then 34-17, comfortable World Cup final win for New Zealand over Australia. So yeah, 6 players, 18% being born overseas, with 2 of them from the previous team. That was Ben Franks and Jerome Kano. Yeah, what a performance. What a World Cup. Dan Carter finally getting his World Cup, where he played, I guess, the whole World Cup. Obviously, 2011, he did make the squad, but got injured. Now, 2019, we go to Japan, where South Africa won. 33 total in the squad, 1 overseas from Zimbabwe, and that's Tendai Mutaruwira, the beast. So 3% from overseas. Rassie Erasmus was the coach. South Africa losing to New Zealand. So first team ever to lose a game and win a World Cup. Losing to New Zealand 23-13. South Africa smashing Namibia 57-3. Smashing Italy 49-3. South Africa killing Canada 66-7. Beating the home nation in the quarterfinal 26-3. But just Japan even making it to the quarterfinal was a massive upset. Beating Ireland in pool play. Then beating Wales 19-16. I remember this was an absolute nail biter. You know, could have gone either way. Wales played brilliant. And then comfortably beating England 32-12 final score. With that Colby try just sealing it to end the game. Now in 2023, the most recent one, South Africa winning again with all 35 players being born in South Africa. Jacques Nienaber, was the coach. The results were 18-3 over Scotland, 76-0 over Romania, 13th 8 loss against Ireland, so second time now in a row that they've lost a game and then won the World Cup. Smashing Tonga 49-18. And I mean, this was the year, right, where everyone's like, it's going to be Northern Hemisphere team. I mean, France looking brilliant. Beating the All Blacks in pool play. Ireland beating South Africa in pool play. Looking strong, probably the strongest team they ever had. And then the quarterfinals came along, and South Africa, obviously first there was the All Blacks beating Ireland, and South Africa beating France 29-28 in one of the best games in the history of rugby. Then somehow beating England 16-15, and then holding on to beat New Zealand, the 14-man New Zealand. They nearly did what the Springboks did against France, where, with a man down, they looked like the better team. But just holding on 12 points to 11 to win 2 in a row in the World Cup. So interesting to see, I guess, the statistics on the teams. Not too many, obviously South Africa being so far away from everyone else. England having the second highest amount. Australia was having a couple, not too many. New Zealand having a few, obviously, with the island's influence. So it's interesting to see the statistics. Obviously I don't think that is high numbers at all. I think it only becomes a problem when it's about a third of your squad, something crazy, where I think that's when there's a problem in your own union for not being able to produce good players. And then you've got to buy players in from outside to be able to make your team a challenging team. So I think it's good to see that none of these teams went over that 20% mark. But most of them obviously grew up in that country and played rugby throughout the years in that country as well. So it's not like they just get popped in from overseas and then they play straight away. So interesting statistics. Let me know what you think below. What do you think about the rules when it comes to, overseas players being able to play in this? Let me know below in the comments. But thank you for watching. Like the video if you did like it about all this information. And I'll see you on the next video.